Hey everybody, welcome to the Tom Parsley channel. I'm Tom, and just like Parsley, we get into a little bit of everything on this channel. And what are we doing today? So you can see behind me and around me here, we're in a salt marsh. And a salt marsh, we're gonna find out, is one of the most diverse habitats on Earth. We have intertidal zone, we're in an estuary. We're gonna see what kind of adaptations the plants have. We're gonna see if we could find any critters here, and just a basic, let's see what we can find, and let's get into it. Let's get muddy because it's gonna be really muddy. So before we get into that, let's do a little quick gear check here. We got a vinyl knits hat, and before we get into the rest of the gear, we wanna talk about ticks a little bit, how to really prepare ourselves for ticks. So if you kind of notice here, let me flip you around so you can see what's going on here. So you might notice that we got the good look going on here. We got the LL Bean boots, not sponsored, but LL Bean. If you're interested, give me a shout out. So we got our LL Bean boots with our socks tucked in because ticks will stay on the outside of your pants, and then we could just do a lint roller and roll it down, and you can always spray down the boots and your socks and your pants and everything to keep the ticks out. And also you want to try to have your, let me see if I can show you here, t-shirt tucked in, because ticks will stay on the outside. Now I know I have my shirt over my pants and they could go under, but at least they'll stay on the shirt that's inside. And ticks don't jump, they don't fly, they don't hop, they just kind of will sense a warm body and start crawling up, and they stop at the first warm, moist spot that they find. Use your imagination to figure out where that is. That's not where you want to tick. So just be tick smart, tick safe, and when you're out in the woods, always stop every once in a while, check, see if you have anything crawling on you, because remember, ticks don't jump, fly, or hop. They're just gonna kind of crawl up on you. So if you see a tick crawling on you, you can take it, put it in Scotch tape, you could just kind of flick it off of you, or you can kind of do whatever you need to do to get it off of you. But just because it's crawling on you doesn't mean you're gonna get any kind of diseases. The tick has to be inside of you to pass over any kind of bacteria or viruses or anything that they may have. All right, so let's get into the salt marsh here. Let's go to its first spot and let's see what we can see. All right, so as we're kind of walking around here, you can see that we've got our waterway going in here, and this area is called an estuary. This whole area is called an estuary. E-S-T-U-A-R-Y, I think. It's a place where fresh water is coming up over there, and salt water, which is coming in over there, they mix together and they form an estuary. So an estuary is going to have a salinity of about 20 to 25 parts per thousand. So that's just a fancy way of saying how much salt is in the water here. Whereas if we went all the way out into the ocean, which is way, 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 way out that way, the ocean would be about 30 to 35 parts per thousand. Here it's between 20 and 25 parts per thousand, but still salty enough that it's definitely going to tell you what kind of plants you're going to see over here. So the first plant, let me just kind of zoom in a little bit over here. There we go. The first plant is going to be this grass right here. This is called Spartina alterniflora. Let me kind of see if I could zoom in a little bit. Zoom, focus. All right, it's not focusing, so let's zoom in a little bit that way. There we go. So this is all Spartina alterniflora, or it's also called cordgrass. This is the first grass that you're going to see in a salt marsh, because this has an adaptation to survive in the salty environment. And I don't know if you could see right over here. I'd have to zoom in a little bit more. Let me get my hand out of that. It's focusing on my hand. Zoom in a little bit more. No, that's even worse. All right. Well, anyway, the plant here, this is a grass, and the grass is going to take in the salt water from its roots, and it's going to excrete the salt in crystals. So you really can't see, but this whole blade of grass is just covered in salt crystals. And it's a really tough plant. It's actually, the edges are kind of sharp. But that's one adaptation that the Spartina alterniflora has to survive in this salty environment that's right over there. Too salty, and it doesn't do any well. It doesn't do well at all. But that little bit of saltiness, that 20 to 25 parts per thousand, and these grasses do really, really well. And also, just like the beach grass that we were talking about in another video, the root system is extensive enough to hold the marsh together, because as we walk a little bit further down, And if you kind of look, ow, that was sharp, I just got poked. There's mud all throughout this salt marsh here, which is what the grasses and the roots of the Spartina alterniflora is holding itself in. So if we kind of walk over here a little bit, and I'm gonna try not to get stuck in the mud, although that would make good content if I got stuck in the mud. Right over here, you could see the mud over here. Let me kind of zoom in a little bit. This is salt marsh mud, and it's almost like quicksand. And we usually find fiddler crabs over here, but I haven't seen any yet, so they might be on another location. But there's mussels inside here. I don't know if you can see, there's one right there, there's one right there. These are called ribbed mussels, and they're filter feeders. So as the water is coming in, they're gonna filter the water out. So they're filtering all the food right out through their body parts. And they're a mollusk, and they're also a bivalve. And this is all that Spartina alterniflora cordgrass. And also on that side, the other side of the shore, that's all Spartina alterniflora cordgrass. And then right behind us is going to be the other type of Spartina called Spartina patens or patens. Patens because it flattens, and you'll see in a minute when we turn around and walk over there. So let's go to a different spot. So right over here, you can really see the different parts of the grass right here. This is that Spartina patens or patens because it flattens. That's a good way to remember that this is what this is. And also you can call it saute. Some people call it saute because way back when the colonists were here, they allowed their cows to kind of graze in here, and they would eat all of this salt hay. But guess what? The milk was, that's right, salty, because this is all salt. And they have the same kind of adaptation that the cordgrass has, which is right over here, to deal with the salty environment. Now right over here, we've got this kind of reddish stuff that you're seeing. Let's take a closer look at that. So here's a nice patch of that reddish stuff we're talking about here. Let's see if we could zoom in on it a little bit. That reddish, it turns red in the fall, which is where we are now. We're in the fall. We're just about near Halloween. But that reddish stuff right there is what we're looking at. Oh, it just focused on my finger. So let me zoom in a little bit more so you can see it. Zoom in a little bit more. There we go. Very good, very good. Now we'll zoom back out and then see what we got here. So all of this reddish stuff here, right here, the common name is glasswort. Now, let me turn you around. So common name, Latin name, what's the point? Who cares? Well, we care because we want to know exactly what plant we're talking about. Like the cordgrass behind us, the salt hay over here, the glasswort that's over here. We want to be able to see exactly what these plants are. So Latin name is really super important. So the best way to remember Latin names is we have a, what do you call that, an acronym? King Philip came over for great seafood, not that other S word, I gotcha. King Philip came over for great seafood. So what does that stand for? That stands for kingdom, phylum, I have to think, King Philip came, class, order, came over for family, genus, species. So all plants, all organisms, everything is put into some kind of grouping where it's going to be some kind of phylum or family. I don't remember all of them, but I do know that the Latin name will definitely be able to tell you what kind of plant we're looking at. Like for example here, this glasswort that we were just looking at, we'll look at it again a little bit closer once we're done with the taxonomy kind of spiel, is Salicornia virginica. There's nothing else in the world that is Salicornia virginica. Just like there's nothing else in the world that is Spartina alterniflora. There's nothing else in the world that is Spartina patens. So that's why it is super important to use Latin names when you want to identify certain organisms. Let's take a closer look at that glasswort Salicornia virginica. So here's that Salicornia virginica or glasswort. But the other fun name for this is picklewort, because the colonists used to pick these and pickle them, because another adaptation is that because it's in salt water, it will store the salt in the cells. So as you eat these little pieces, it tastes salty, just like pickles. So let's give it a try. So here it is, a little piece I just picked off. Salty, very, very salty. But disclaimer, don't do as I do your research. Don't just go out in the middle of anywhere and start picking plants off and start eating them. You don't want to do that. You want to know exactly what you're looking at and what you're trying to taste, and make sure it's edible, because I always like to say everything is edible once. Everything is edible once. So be very careful out there and make sure that before you taste anything, before you try to eat anything, you know exactly what you're eating, because you want to be safe out there. So there's my little disclaimer. So turn you around again. So just what you could see here, this is all that mud down in here that's collected, because once the high tide comes up, the water doesn't really move. So you can kind of see out here, the water's not really moving that much. It kind of slows down. And once the tide comes up and all that water comes up here in the marsh, it really slows down to the point where it doesn't move at all, and all the sediment and silt that's in the water can settle out down into the marsh, and then the marsh can slowly get bigger and bigger and bigger. So why do we need marshes? Why did I say it's an important part of our ecosystem? Is number one, for humans, the salt marshes will absorb flood water. So if there is a flood, full moon, high tide, there's a storm surge, there's a hurricane, the marshes will kind of absorb the water and be like a buffer. So all of that land behind me here, it wouldn't flood. So all of this marsh would be able to take in all of that excess water and hold it. See, where I'm standing here, turn you around again, it is high tide. We're at high tide, but notice there's no water here. But if there was a storm surge or a hurricane, there would be water in here, and the marsh would kind of just absorb all of that excess water, and the back land over there wouldn't flood. So salt marshes are really important. So as we're walking around here, just remember that historically humans have looked at salt marshes and said, hey, this would be a great place for an airport, or hey, this would be a great place for a garbage dump, or hey, this would be a great place for apartment buildings. And then they fill in the marshes, and then there goes that protection from floods. Or they dig ditches through the marshes to kind of drain it to get the mosquitoes out, because the mosquitoes can harbor some diseases. And then by doing that, you kind of destroy the marsh. Oh, the sun's behind me. Let me turn your back around again. So, all right. So let's move on down to marsh, and let's see if we could see something else pretty cool. It's pretty funny. As I've been walking on the marsh, I kind of can feel it squish, 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 squish. And one of the fun things I like to do, oh, the sun's right behind me, geez. One of the fun things I like to do in a marsh when I'm with a group of people is kind of jump up and down. Obviously you can't feel it, but if you jump up and down, you can feel the marsh kind of vibrate and shake a little bit, because it's basically unstable. We're just on a whole bunch of silt. So sorry, I'm looking where I'm walking because I want to make sure I don't fall into a sinkhole or anything, because again, that would make good content, but then I'd be stuck and I'd have to get myself out, and hopefully I don't lose my camera. So let me turn you around, and we'll stop at our next little stop here. So as you can see, we are here at high tide. Here's water right in this little creek area over here. And I don't know if you could see, let me zoom you in a little bit. On the far side of this little creek here, you might see like a line, like a darker line. That is the high tide line, and there's all the water that's coming in. That is the high tide line. So as the water comes in filled with silt and sediment and everything else, it's going to deposit all of that silt and sediment on the grass, and you could kind of tell where that line is. So where we are now, we're at high tide. So if I zoom in over on the other side, you can see that there really is no line. Oh, what do we got here? Is that a bald eagle? Oh my God, I think that's a bald eagle. Holy crap, that's one of the first bald eagles I've seen on Long Island in a long, long, long time. Wow, and I got it right on camera. You never know what you're gonna see on the Tom Parsley channel, so we got a bald eagle on video. Super, super cool. So fun fact about bald eagles, back in the 70s and 80s, we were spraying DDT to kill mosquitoes that were carrying diseases everywhere. Turns out that DDT kind of moves up the food chain. So even though it was the mosquitoes, the fish were eating the little critters that had the DDT. The fish was getting the toxin DDT. And the eagles and other predatory birds would eat those fish that had the DDT, and it would get in their system. Oh, don't hit the microphone. And if it got up in their system when they laid their eggs, the toxin would cause the calcium levels in the eggshells to be less than it normally should be. And then when they sat on their eggs crushed. And then because their eggs crushed, no babies, so they needed to have more babies coming in, so their population went straight down. So since DDT has been outlawed in the United States, we've been pretty lucky that the bald eagle has been increasing, and other predatory birds have been increasing their levels to levels where it's pretty safe. And we just saw a bald eagle. I mean, how cool is that? Okay, so what we were talking about before the bald eagle came in is we're zooming in on that coastline on the other side, just to kind of see where the high tide line is. Now, as we're zooming in, you might see some fish. There's been, as we've been over here, there's been some fish jumping in the creek over here. So it's still pretty good fishing. Like I said, it's the end of October, almost Halloween, and the trees are definitely turning color, and we're definitely here at high tide. All right, that was your moment of zen. Jeez, I'm still hitting the microphone. I'm still flabbergasted from seeing that bald eagle. That was wild. That was so cool. So let's talk a little bit about biodiversity in a salt marsh. So all of this mud harbors thousands of species of bacteria, and depending on who you talk to, there's more biodiversity here in a salt marsh than there is in a rainforest because of all the bacterial life that's here. So there's a lot of decomposition that's going on here. The mud is being broken down. Kind of that smell that you always associate with like low tide, that's that marsh mud that gives it that kind of smell. That it's kind of a sulfury odor because all of the organisms, organic molecules are being broken down, and one of the byproducts is that kind of hydrogen sulfide smell. But biodiversity is key here in the salt marsh. Even though we only have 2 or 3 types of plants, when you get down to the bacterial level, the microbiology level, there are thousands and thousands of different types of bacteria here. And we didn't see any fiddler crabs, which I'm kind of surprised at, because usually we see fiddler crabs in the mud, but they may be starting to dig down. Although it is pretty warm out today, so I'm surprised we haven't seen any. So let's continue down the marsh and see what else we can see. All right, so we kind of came up to the high end of the marsh here where the high tide line would be. And right behind me here, you can see maybe the white flowers that are blooming. That is all marsh elder. Marsh elder marks the high tide line of a salt marsh. So that's kind of where the salt water kind of ends. Marsh elder does have a little bit of ability to withstand salt water, but that's where we know that the high tide line is the highest, the marsh elder. And the marsh elder blooms in fall at the end of the year, which is where we are right here. So if I didn't say already, I don't think I did, but we are in Indian Island Campground in Riverhead, New York, in Long Island, New York State. And this waterway that we're talking about here is part of the Peconic Bay, which if you think of Long Island as the Twin Forks, Riverhead is kind of in the middle, Riverhead. So the Peconic River kind of flows right through Riverhead and opens up into Peconic Bay, which is where we are. And that's also the estuary where we are. So we're talking about an estuary. This is an important estuary. So let me flip you around and see what we can see back here. So we're here at the high tide line. The marsh elder is all the way over there. You can kind of see the white flowers. Let me zoom in a little bit. Yeah, those white flowers right over there, that's the marsh elder. That marks the high tide line. We've got trees in the back over there. Obviously, they can't stand salt water. So this is the kind of end of the salt marsh. All the Phragmites is right over there, right in front of the marsh elder over there. And all of this grass is Spartina alterniflora. And then we've got all the flat grass over here, the Spartina patens. And then there was the water that we were just at over there. And Peconic Bay that we were just talking about kind of opens up right all the way down there. So there's a lot more to a salt marsh. We just kind of scratched the surface of a salt marsh because we didn't see any snails, we didn't see any fiddler crabs because those are the kind of other organisms, the flamboyant megafauna, not the flora, but we're looking for flamboyant megafauna. It was an old naturalist that told me that. I'm like, oh, that's a really good term. I like that. You know, the big stuff. So there were some fish out in the water over there, but mainly we were looking at plants and adaptations in a salt marsh, especially late in the season, late fall. So we're gonna end the video here. I want you to thank you for coming along on the Tom Parsley channel, because just like Parsley, we get into a little bit of everything. I'm Tom. I want to thank you all for coming on the journey. And don't forget to do those 3 things: like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, and keep on viewing, because we got another video coming up soon. We try to drop a video once a week, and you know, some cool stuff, some different stuff, and just seeing if that bald eagle is coming through again, because that would be really cool. But these are just seagulls that are coming through here. They're looking at all the fish in the creek over there. Anyway, okay, we're gonna end it here. Like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.